and welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. I was about to say I'm so excited to have Dr. Amy Baker here, and then it occurred to me that I say that every episode. Like, I'm so excited because I love every single one of my guests. They just show up for me, and I love how the universe works in that way, and it brings me the most coolest people. Dr. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And the way that Dr. Amy came to me through the universe was through our mutual friend, Coach Chris. So shout out to Coach Chris.
Yes.
Woohoo. Let's get right into it. And I want to ask you, I'm eliminating the word want. If you listen back to the last episode of the podcast in 2022, I talked about things that we could do without, or things to pay attention to moving into the new year, and that word want, because it indicates scarcity. So let's simply start with the question of what were the values and beliefs you were raised with that contributed to you becoming who you did as a young adult?
Wow. A lot of the typical societal bullshit. That there's a certain path to success. That success means, a good job and good money and retirement after, retirement funds. And if you mind your P's and your Q's and you dot your I's and cross your T's just right, just so, everything's going to be great. And so the other part of that was my strategy was to be perfect, because I was a good achiever. And in order to get love, I did everything perfectly, which worked in some ways for a while until it didn't.
I can totally relate to that. And I'm sure the listeners can relate to that as well. I'm curious, are you the oldest child? Oh, okay.
I'm the youngest. And they were a little easier on me. My parents, it was just my sister and I. And I just showed a lot of promise. And I hate the phrase, you have so much potential.
Yeah.
Because it implies that I'm not okay where I'm at. And I heard that so much. And I know it was meant lovingly, but it really fucked with me.
I can imagine, because, it's telling you you're not good enough here, but you could be good if you try a little harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Just keep trying harder.
It's a moving
maybe you'll
target.
get there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did that play out in who you became and what choices you made for your career?
Wow. So when I followed there's a few ways that showed up. When I followed my dream to be a ballerina, I left home at 16 to go study in the Bay Area. That was great, but then my perfectionism came in, was a severe anorexic, depressed, and there were a lot of beautiful things about it. And that perfectionism and needing external validation led to some not so great things. So when I didn't do that, mainly because my parents wanted me to go to college, they're like, don't follow your passion, follow this safe path. So I ended up giving up that and saying, well, I want a doctorate. And I went, applied to medical and pharmacy school. I really wanted to be a physician, actually. And I applied to both schools, and pharmacy took me and medical didn't. And kind of like a lot of my relationships after that, I went with who would take me.
Right. It's not about what I want.
It's where that external
I can get, or what they are willing to give me.
Yeah. Like, oh, you love me. Okay, I need that to feel whole, so I'm going to go with that. I mean, not that extreme, but looking back, I definitely see that codependent behavior showing up every part of my life until the past couple of years, for sure. So I entered a doctor of pharmacy program, 4 years of college, $175,000 in student loan debt. And then after 11 years of that, I was like, oh, wait, I never actually believed in this.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I went to do this, but I don't actually like this field. Okay.
Right. Yeah. That's like a
How
quick
did that
arc,
show up
but
for you?
that
Like,
was...
was it like a lightning bolt? You were in a meditation one day and you just got like this massive insight, or what happened? How did you figure that out?
No, I think... So going into pharmacy, they often referred to dis-ease state management, disease. And it made me want to puke at the time, and it still does. But I kind of stuffed that away because I had to justify my devotion to my field. I was a leader. I couldn't acknowledge that. But about 2017, things started to shift for me when I realized that my soul... I wrote this poem, like my soul was, there's like a leak in my boat. My vitality was slowly draining. And I knew that it was partially because I wasn't in alignment. And I would go and take this great money that I was making, and like, I kind of liken it to my eating disorders, where I would binge on soul-filling activities, like Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes and these retreats that I'd fill up on, and then carry that and hope that sustained me in a job where eventually that was like, oh. So I'd binge and purge. I was like,
right,
this isn't sustainable.
Well,
and it's not actually helping.
That it would be like, like an addict. Like, it starts out, I only need one every 6 months, and then I need it every 4 months, and then I need it every week. Like, I need to go on a retreat every week, and then you're like, I might have a problem.
Yeah. So I started seeing the pattern, and I knew that my job was not fulfilling at that point. Like I said, it was about a 4-year period where I was kind of complaining about it, trying to get my way out of Oregon. Until the point where I was like, I'm sick of hearing myself complain, and I'm sure my friends are too. So what do I do about this? And I had a perfect storm. I'm sure many people had a perfect storm in 2020. But that's when I was able to shift out of that job and into something that is in alignment with what I believe.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to share that if that's where you want to go. But
it's interesting because, similar to many people's stories, everything was fine for a very long time until it wasn't. Or it's fine, but not fine. It just takes a long time to get up the courage. I was on a call this morning doing a presentation on courage and how it's not the absence of fear. It's moving forward even though you feel the fear, and that finding that courage can take a while. It can take, even though things aren't right, finding the courage to take the action that you need to take takes a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's being like almost on I envision a journey kind of like the books I used to read as a kid, like the Choose Your Own Adventure, where it's like, there's so many forks in the road. And the more you align with something, the more synchronicity happens and stuff starts presenting. And I started going, okay, things are presenting. This is a good sign. I think I'm on the right path. Right. But it wasn't an overnight. Now there was a moment that was the decision maker for me, but it took 4 years to get there. So when I mentioned the perfect storm, in 2020 I had a relationship crisis, internal crisis, where I was dating a guy and for about 3 months, and he ghosted me, and I just went into 6 weeks of severe
Wait,
depression.
after
like,
3
grief.
months, he ghosted you.
It was bizarre.
Like, not just
Yeah,
a couple
completely
of
ghosted
dates.
me. Like I moved
Wow.
into, yeah, I won't
Okay.
go into the whole story, but and, and, uh, and so I went into 6 weeks of crazy grief, like crying 6 hours a day. And started walking. Could barely function. And I said, I need to fix this. I am not doing this to myself again. This is my codependency. Like, and so I entered the relationship school to become a relationship coach. Really just to like work on my shit.
I want to learn how to fix me. Then maybe I can help some other
And
people.
I was wanting.
And actually, I want to retract that again. The fix me. There's nothing wrong with us, but work on that issue.
No. Yeah, I was off path, and years of therapy, eating disorder treatment program, like nothing helped me fix my codependency. So anyway, I'm doing the training, and then I was working remote for 2 years in my job, and they wanted me on site, and I was like, no. But basically, I had a lot of trauma surface January of 21, so I went off to Maui, and I didn't tell them because I was working remote, and they never required me to tell them where I was, and I went where I needed to heal, and I was there for 6 weeks, and they said, we need you on site tomorrow. And I was like, that's not going to happen. Yeah. And so there was some stuff that happened, and then they said, if you want to keep your job, be on site 100% of the time. And when they said that, I decided I was out, because the one thing keeping me in my job, I realized at that point, besides the good money, 8 weeks of PTO, honestly, it was that I had freedom. And when that freedom went away, I was like, my value of freedom was above the job. And
this is why it's so important for people to get clear on what their values are, so that you can make decisions that serve you. So if you knew that your highest value was freedom and that was being taken away, you could go, yeah, I'm out. And there's no doubt, no question, no hesitation. You just know.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was part of my program. And that's what I work with people is that's the first thing we do is look at our values, and are we aligned with our values, or could we maybe shift how we're living in accordance with our actual values?
That is what I work
super
on with
important.
clients too at the very beginning of the Fuck Being Fine program is we start with examining what are your values and are you living them? And one of the ways to tell that is look at your calendar. And is your calendar filled with things that serve your values or not? Like if you say family is a high value, but you have no time for family in your calendar, either family is not, or you're not living in accordance with your values. And once you're aware, then you can make a change.
Absolutely. Which is super empowering to know that, because then you enter that zone of like, I know.
And there's no right or wrong around which values you choose. They're very personal.
No. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And they are right for you.
So after you left, or after you bade them goodbye, what happened? Did you stay in Hawaii?
No, I had to go back to Oregon. And actually the perfect storm of this that was so good for me and why I call myself an empowerment activist is because my sexual trauma surfaced. Part of that I realized is anytime I felt powerless in my life, my body would go into fight or flight, hypervigilance, and get super reactive. And I didn't understand. And even if I couldn't get a word in edgewise in a conversation, it was like super activated. Now I understand that. So I'm working with a trauma therapist. I'm forced to be on site 100% of the time. I feel very powerless over what I can do in my job and where I can be. And so it was essentially re-traumatizing me in this way that I could work with my therapist. And it helped me to realize that how many of our patients and providers are actually being re-traumatized if they have this in their past because they're powerless. They feel powerless to care for their patients. The patients feel powerless to advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how many people don't even realize that the system itself is likely re-traumatizing people and therefore making them, keeping them sick. And that's why it was a perfect storm. And I don't know if I answered your question.
Wait, I want to back up a second because you said they required you to be on site, and so you said I'm out, but you still went back to Oregon. Oh, okay.
Well, I planned my 6-month exit.
Like, I quit and I'm out of here the next day. That's why I thought maybe you stayed in Hawaii. Okay.
No. Yeah, it was. I flew right back. I went on site after 2 years remote, and fought the good fight.
Gotcha.
And planned my 6-month exit.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what were you doing that, like, you saw this, how this was affecting the people in your industry, and so are you working now with people in your industry? Is that where you focused your work? Okay.
Not yet. I would like to, for sure. And I'm still formulating what that looks like. I honestly, I was in a group last night and I think it's Nietzsche talks about the camel carrying the burdens of others. And then there's the lion that says, fuck it, I'm out. And then there's the child stage, which is where you come to aligning and living your life, is kind of how I understood it. And I'm just coming out of the lion stage, redefining who I am and coming out of the mentality of the healthcare field. Enough to where I can know, okay, now I can approach them this way, knowing, but I was still wrapped up in how they thought. Transitions take more time than we often want.
I don't even know if it's often. It seems like always. Well, all right, maybe that's all encompassing. Yes, they do often take time. Even just doing work, like not even talking about like life transitions. It's like you plan something in your calendar and okay, I'm going to spend 2 hours writing this, and 5 hours later you're still not finished and you're like, what is taking me so long? Other people would have had this done in 2 hours, but it's not true. That's how long it takes. We want things to be shorter. Like, this should only take X amount of time, and it would probably only take other people X amount, but like then we beat ourselves up because it took us longer, when it probably would have taken everybody else longer too.
Right. Yeah, and honestly, the more we slow down, the faster that process goes. It feels very counterintuitive.
Exactly.
But
it's very counterintuitive. So speaking of being counterintuitive, talk to me, since we are focusing a bit on, in this season, on taking sabbaticals. And I know you've taken 2.
Yeah. So one beautiful thing. So I think one thing I didn't share was when I did leave my job, I sold everything I own and hit the road as a nomad. And I had scheduled a 10-day Vipassana retreat in Texas. And it was the first time, like I've done one before, but it was at the end of the 10 days, they wanted people to serve. And I thought, holy shit, I don't have anything planned.
Yeah,
like I don't need to be anywhere.
Right? Yeah.
Ever. Yeah. And if I stay there, the housing is paid for. I'm being fed. Mm-hmm. Like I have no expenses. So my savings is good. And I was like, yeah. let me just slow down after the chaos of selling all my stuff for 3 months and feel the simplicity of living like a monk for a month. And I could have stayed longer, but I had I had some other commitments that I needed to do, you
Oh,
can't really
yeah.
be online
Yeah.
on the retreat center. So, yeah. So, yeah, that was amazing to know that I could pause. And coming out of it, my life was very simple for
I was going to ask, has
a
it
couple
stayed that
months.
way? No.
No, I
Okay.
created my own chaos again.
Mhm.
But I know what that's like. I know in my body the value of it. And, once I get out of my own way, I can go
Do you
back
think we
to
can
some
live that
portion of that.
way, like,
Right.
indefinitely, or is that just a place to go to rest? Like, can people actually live in that space for a long term?
I think it depends on what you want to create in life. Um, and when I say that space, the space after I came out of the retreat center, I was meditating an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. That is very doable once you've sat for 10, 11 hours a day, like 2 hours a
Sure.
day is nothing. Keeping it going,
I'm
it really isn't.
trying
It's
to
like,
imagine what it
it's
would be like
restore,
to sit for 10 or 11 hours a day, because I'm like, I don't know if I could do that.
right? Um, you could, it's just, I always tell people, they're like, oh, I don't think I can do that. I'm like, you could,
Yeah.
it's just not a high enough value right now. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I think the busier you are, the better, the more like the higher the value of sitting for an hour or 2 hours a day. You don't need to do it all day. Um,
Hmm.
People talk about flow state. That can
Yeah.
be part of flow state. Um, it's just touching
Right.
in,
Yeah.
you know, to that being state, that non-reactive place where the body's not driving our actions, where our brain goes offline and we don't know why we're doing what we're doing. The body is the subconscious in action. It's like, it just, we
Hmm.
do these things and don't even know why, which is why it's important
Right.
to sit.
Yeah. Habits are the body. It,
Hmm.
Joe Dispenza talks about the body driving the mind, like controlling the mind, because we just
Yes.
get into these habits and we do things out of habit. So it's the body controlling the mind. And when you sit, you give the mind the control back.
Hmm. Yeah, and the body's not allowed to move into action, reaction, really, based on the sensation that we're not even aware
Hmm.
of. The sensation is the
Yeah.
subconscious leading the body.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
He is.
Joe
He
Dispenza's
really
great.
is. I have a question for you about sabbatical versus vacation, because I get this from people when I talk to them about teaching people how to start living the sabbatical life, which does not necessarily mean you have to go on
Mm,
sabbatical for a year or even a month, but how do you incorporate some of
no.
those concepts into sabbatical life? And then people ask me, what's the difference between a sabbatical and a vacation? So I'm curious to hear your response.
I'm so glad you asked that because that reminded me of why I knew that for me right now, nomadic life is it. So, and I think there's so much permission in allowing ourselves to live the sabbatical life that we just need to give ourselves. So when I was working remote as a director, I was car camping and I would go off into Forest Service roads and find places with like 4G
Wait, did you have a
and
map
do my
that
work
said
there.
4G here?
And I remember, oh, I have, yes, Onyx Hunt
Okay.
is an app and I would like geo mark places with
Okay,
where
cool.
I could revisit that had
I figured there
service.
must be some kind of app.
So, um, yeah, but I wanted to go clamming on the Oregon coast. And there was one day left in the year when I could do it in the morning at low tide. And it was a Tuesday. And I was like, shit, that's the middle of the week. And I said, screw it, I'm going to go. And I went and I was like clamming at 5:30 in the morning, and then I go in my car and take a conference call, and then I go out and clam some more and come in and take a conference call. And then I spent the rest of the day on the back of my tailgate on my truck looking at the ocean and working. And I did this for the week, and I came back on a Friday, and my daughter was visiting, and I was like, is tomorrow Monday? She's like, Mom, tomorrow's Saturday. And I was like, whoa, I feel like I didn't even work this week. And like every light bulb went off. I said, this is what I want. I want my life and my work to be intermingled in a way that supports me feeling that I'm living my life the way I want. And nothing else. I mean, to work a full week and not feel like I worked because I was still living, I wasn't putting off my life, which is what vacation is. Let me put off my life and then just try and binge and purge. It's like, try and live that in a week or two.
Yeah, you found true integration.
Doesn't work.
Which is exactly what this is coming to me right now as we're talking. Living the sabbatical life is that true integration. And not trying to, I really dislike the term of work-life balance because there isn't really, it doesn't really exist. But that integration is similar to the integration that we feel when we really understand a concept. Like, you can teach people some of the things that we've been talking about and they understand it, but it's not integrated into their being.
Totally. Yeah. And that integrated it for me. Like every light bulb went off and I said, this is what I want. This is happening. And so it was that actually like that realization, that moment, that when later my freedom was taken away, I was like,
yes,
because I decided I want that. Integration.
Yeah, and I'm
totally
about to ask you another question because I have notes that I took from when we talked in our pre-show conversation, and you mentioned something about intuition versus instinct. That's all I wrote down was intuition versus instinct, which means I meant to ask you about it, and that's all I got now.
Awesome. Yeah. So I've learned an amazing framework to understand human behavior and life in general. And essentially, our minds either judge something as good or bad. Like every circumstance is totally neutral until we create a story or put a judgment on it. And so if we're looking up, we'll use a person. So say I'm looking up to someone and kind of putting them on a pedestal, then I'm going to have an impulse towards that. That's where we have addiction, that's where we have fantasizing and, or making ourselves small in relation to someone else. If I look down on someone and judge them, I'm going to have an instinct away. It's actually survival mechanism. Like, oh, that's bad. They're toxic or they're whatever. And true integration is seeing that we own all the traits that we either look up to or we look down at. And so if we're instinctively moving away from something, we know that there's an imbalance. If we're being impulsive, like we feel like we're not in control of this impulse towards someone or something, we're not integrated. And when we can balance the perception and own all the traits that we see in others, it's intuition. We're actually balancing the perception in our mind. We balance the charges in our mind, and then we drop into the heart. And that's where intuition is. So that's where I love that if I'm impulsive or instinctive, like gut instinct is not the same as intuition.
That's interesting. Because those terms are often used interchangeably.
Yeah. Yeah. In this framework, I mean, everyone has their own definition of what instinct is. But if I have a gut instinct away from something, that's if it's toward or away, in that sense, it's not from a balanced perspective, and I don't understand my thoughts around that. But if it's a knowing, I think some people call a knowing a gut instinct. That to me is intuition.
In your definition of the gut instinct that we want to move away from something, it's more of a like an animalistic. I mean, we talk about animals having instincts.
Yeah. It's actually, we're actually in the back brain
like
at that
fear.
point. And people, yeah. And so if we're judging someone positive or negative, or a circumstance positive or negative, then we're not in our intuitive state, because we're being ruled by the amygdala and by our emotions. And we're reactive versus responsive.
That right there is another reason why it's so important to allow yourself the space to get quiet and to meditate, or to do something meditative, so that you can get in touch with that inner voice. And when you practice meditation regularly, you are much more able to respond instead of react.
Right, because you're fostering your observer.
Yep.
I like kind of put the observer, like you observing yourself, going, oh wait, that was impulsive, or that was, that was from out of fear, out of judgment,
right?
Or
not from your true soul.
the observer role. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah. Our
Oh my
higher
gosh,
self.
I feel like there was so much value in this conversation that we just had, that listeners should go back and listen to it again a second time, because there's so much here. Before we go though, what is your song that you listen to when you need an extra boost of energy? What's your hype song?
So I usually don't have those, but I love your question, because I just became obsessed with Morgan St. Jean.
Okay.
Do It Like a Girl. And it's a very empowering, I feel it's an empowering song for women, because it names a lot of things that we tend to shove under the rug.
Yeah.
And say, oh, we're fine with that. And she's like, I'm not fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to call this out. And and she has videos of people running on a treadmill in heels, and women running 19 miles an hour on a treadmill. She's like, run like a girl? Mm-hmm. Let me show you how we do it.
All right, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And then finally, if people want to continue the conversation with you, or man, I did it again. If people would like to continue the conversation with you, how can they do that?
I'm on social media as amyrxbaker everywhere. I would say go to my Linktree and schedule a free call with me, a half-hour call, and we can discuss what next steps you would like in your life, you would love in your life, what your blocks are maybe, and then I can tailor a program. And also, I would love to, if we can, I have a guide, 6 steps to a free 10-day retreat.
Oh, cool.
I'd love to share with people.
Absolutely.
If that's possible. So they can either ask me for that, or we can
Is there
find
a
a way
link
to
we can
offer
put
that.
again in the show notes? Okay.
I'll figure that out.
Just reach out to Dr. Amy and ask her for the guide. Yeah, and set up a conversation with her, because she is such a cool person, and I'm so honored to have had this conversation. Thank you for joining me today on Fine is a 4-letter word.
You're very welcome, and thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.